in our time, in our situation, also on a society level and on a political level and so on, and in the development of psychotherapy, I think just especially from what I learned from Erickson, I'm sure maybe that's very similar to you, what we've learned and what we learned from other people and what we learned from our own experience. In a sense, when I look to political discussions, when I look to political developments in society, especially in Europe, but not only in Europe, also in the States or so, I think I see so many similarities in processes, in communication processes, in processes in the development of consciousness of people and behavior, like I perceive it, which you can explain from Ericksonian concepts, and there is also something which I would say, well, don't we have some task in a sense also to contribute to a world where all this knowledge in a sense is used and so to make more, how would you say, I would say, support more integration between dissociated parts, not only in the individuals, but also so. How do you see that?
I agree. I think, and sadly, our communities are broken right now. You know, we see culture and community as very organic, which means it needs to be recreated by all these daily rituals and so forth. It needs to be rewoven. Because of different things in television and social media, it's strange hearing me sound like a traditionalist. I think are really significant on the sense that people do no longer feel connected to one another as much as we used to. Arthur Koestler in the 50s coined this term holon to describe the systemic idea of something that is whole and complete at one level, but merely a fragment of the next higher level. And I think human beings are excellent examples of holons, that we are, at one level, we're autopoietic, but at an equally important level, where our identity is a part of a we-ness. And in many ways, sustained suffering is an expression of one part of the holon being separated and isolated out. And that was one of the basic systemic ideas, the identified patient, and also Erickson, you're never focusing just on the problem, but all the resources of the person. I think this is happening at epidemic levels, and I think the fascism and the violence and the economic equality that is occurring is an expression of that isolation of the parts from the greater whole. So if we don't make a significant shift, we're not going to be able to do psychotherapy. You know, I think it's going to get so bad. You know, I think we can see, I mean, in my country, Donald Trump was just elected, and I think that's a really bad sign. It's a sign of total disintegration and disconnect and dissociation in the politics of cruelty. So I think everything we're talking about, that what we were able to be lucky enough to learn and look at in smaller applications, we have to bring it into larger communities. It's not really just a nice option.
Yeah,
it's a necessary
it's a necessary decision. Yeah, that's it. But just to close that, so I'm totally with you, and I think, and I try in my work also doing seminars, so is, from my understanding, only reasonable when it's also relating always to these kind of issues. It's a very small thing, but like Buckminster Fuller said, act local, think global, act local. So you can just do what you can do, but I experience it every day, in a sense, also inside of me as a challenging task in that way that, for example, when I look at people which I would call fascist or so, I get this immediate response of saying, oh God, he should be hit, or this asshole or so, or these politicians, they should be whatsoever, something very discounting. And on the other side, I know exactly from my understanding, if I would follow these impulses in my way, I just would repeat the same pattern which I accused them, in a sense. But nevertheless, I have to stand up and take a position, a clear position, for another world and for another co-cultural coexistence and things like that. But also have to, and it's hard for me, emotionally also hard, to stay open to communication with those people. Of course, I can't force them, but always to try to invite them to communicate, because my understanding is they do it for a certain longing, for a longing also to belong to a community, to come out of isolation, become out of being afraid of all those things, but use, in a sense, solutions or attempts of solutions which are destructive. But to have these contradictory things inside of it, that's very hard.
But maybe those are just complementary. I mean, I think you would agree. I mean, I've always had this rule in my office that clients are free to have all sorts of different experiences, but it's not okay for them to do physical violence.
Okay, of course.
So they can't break furniture, they can't hit other people. That's totally out of bounds. And so that response requires a clear, centered no.
Exactly.
And then if we see, on the other hand, our addiction is sort of another thing, is that I think it's important to point out to people, you know, when you do this addiction, to try to reflect, you are dishonoring everything that you value and you love. On the other hand, we need to create these new possibilities in these new communities, so people realize whatever the drivers are for that anger, for that desperation, for that addiction, is that there's opportunities for them to develop in a creative way. The fact that you're saying that it's so hard, I think, you know, I totally agree with it. It illustrates how hard it is for everybody. I mean, if people in our situation, we're pretty well off going to. We have so many opportunities, and we've had so much education, and we find that to be open to these intense differences is stretching us beyond where we've been before. Then we realize, boy, I mean, for people who've like grown up and you know, really without education and et cetera, it's hard.
Of course.
But it has to be done.
Yeah.
Because we can't let violence destroy.
Exactly. In Germany, I don't know how you call that, but in Germany, for the constitution and things like that, there is a kind of and I like this part. There's no freedom for enemies of freedom. And you have to put, no, not one step more on the one side, but on the other side, in a sense, you have to offer opportunities to be still in contact, right, but only when the action is stopped, in a sense. And but it begins inside of myself, I realize in myself, because sometimes I would like to go with this impulse, or just hit him in the face, this asshole and so, but then I would just repeat the same action. So, and to work, it's always to work in two directions. Right.
So it looks like we're not just going to be able to retire and watch sports.
Yeah.
That many miles to go before we sleep. There's a lot to do in the world. So how about it?
Let's go on. But now we stop here.
Yeah, we'll stop here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Günther.
It's good to have you as a friend.
Likewise. Likewise.